A to the K.
To the K. To the K.
Hello, one and all. Welcome to the A2theK Wrestling Show. We're going to have a little bit of a conversation around the brand split, Anthony.
Yes, we are, Carl.
Asking,
yes, we are. Something we've never talked about before.
never
never talked about this
not
before.
in the lost episodes from the
lost
last
tapes.
week. But Anthony, we're going to delve into whether or not it is time to end the brand split.
I think it's a good topic to talk about, Alvin.
Inside jokes.
Inside jokes. Anyhow,
yes.
I mean, we've, I think, possibly been vocal about this in the past about the brand split.
Yes.
Especially when they did the Superstar Shake-Up about 4 years ago, and they seem to have forgotten about that now. But let's talk about the current landscape of wrestling, or WWE, and whether the brand split is merited.
Yeah, I think that's the problem. Today, I'm not sure it is. When they first introduced it, way back when, right? When was it? 2002, right? Right after the invasion, they just had a massive roster, 100 plus people, ex-WCW, ex-ECW. It made so much sense. And they were like, you know what? The roster's too big and bloated. We're not going to feature everyone. Let's split it, right? And it was fun. It was exciting. You had that competitiveness between Raw and Smackdown. Yeah. And it created a platform for a lot of people as well. Like, you know, Smackdown was your favourite show, wasn't it?
Fucking loved it, yeah.
And it was, you know, in large part because it gave people who we didn't expect to have the opportunity that chance. Edge, Eddie Guerrero.
Do you know what?
JBL.
Unsung example. And some things that you question about the brand split, right? So they used it as an opportunity to push certain talent. So, like, one of the notorious ones, they broke up the Dudley Boys, using the brand splits. Not in the 2002, I don't think, but in one of the subsequent brand splits, they split them up, and Devon went over to SmackDown. And I think it's a rather unsung side. Devon was, for me, the breakout star out of them two. All due respect,
got over with that Devon gimmick.
Bubba was huge in Impact, but for me, solo stars on WWE at the time, Devon got massively over as Reverend Devon, and that was thanks to the brand split and thanks to him getting to be able to feature that gimmick and put that gimmick over and having the time to do that. And that is what you thank the brand split for, because he would never have got that with the size of the roster at the time if it weren't split up like that. No. So it was definitely, like you say, post-invasion. Yeah, definitely merited, made sense. Yeah,
and I think, you know, in that aspect, when they had that massive roster, it did create that friendly competition, and it gave you, you know, an alternative, a difference to tune in every single week, and you could feature really prevalent top stars on Raw and then different top stars on SmackDown and tune in, and it would be great.
And that's why you always connect Undertaker with SmackDown and not Raw. Yeah, he's been on both. But
think back to that Paul Heyman thing. The thing is like, you were only champion because Triple H didn't want to work Tuesdays or whatever.
Infamous.
So they did all that. It was all entertaining. You know, they did the draft. They were good. It felt big and exciting and fresh and new, didn't it, at the time?
Exactly. And they worked. The drafts worked really well in the early years when it was like a rivalry, and like. Eric was in charge of Raw, and was it Steph in charge of SmackDown initially?
Initially, it was Steph, and then it became Teddy, didn't it? Yeah. I
feel like, was Ric Flair involved at one point?
Probably.
As one of the co-owners. Remember that?
God.
Remember that post-invasion thing?
Wasn't Austin the GM at one point as well?
Possibly. They had a lot of GMs.
Yeah.
They had a lot of GMs.
Foley. Loads of stuff going on.
And whilst we've both agreed in the past that the whole GM, manager, authority figure type role is kind of overdone in itself, I think that almost ties into the fact that maybe the brand split's done, because like part of the fun of it was that rivalry, and there's no rivalry now. In fact, they have to fabricate excuses to move people to different shows when they need to move them to different shows.
They tried to bring in the networks as an element to it, didn't they? I remember one draft.
I admire them trying that.
Yeah, and I don't want to be disrespectful to Natalia, but they had it like the war rooms of like Fox and fucking USA or whatever network it's on, and they were so made up to sign Natalia, and like the execs are fist pumping and everything. It's like, okay, a bit over the top.
Okay.
But, you know.
Like, especially early on in the draft, it's like, would you not want, like, I don't know, current champions or anything?
Well, yeah, exactly. Like, you know, it's so good for their network that they got it. So they've tried a lot of stuff, I think, and it certainly served a purpose, and, you know, it had a place, and it was good for a number of years for all them reasons.
Yes.
But the situation where we are now is the roster is significantly smaller. It's still a big roster, but let's forget NXT and stuff for the minute, right?
Yeah.
Looking at the active roster.
I mean, that's the other thing as well. Like, sorry, we will go back to the active roster, but the fact that NXT's Not in the mix, but in the mix. So they've got another brand, which isn't officially a brand, which is sometimes developmental unless it's not. Yeah. It's only developmental when it loses to AEW, otherwise it's a brand in itself.
Yeah.
Right? But that doesn't count as part of the whole brand split.
No.
But then sometimes they are included in the draft. Yeah. So their own rules kind of got really fucking fractured by that.
Well, I mean, it's happened with like, you know, as you said before, the superstar shake-up, or like when they had that rule where there was like, what did they call it, where you could bring, you know, certain stars on
the Charlotte rule.
Yeah, the Charlotte rule.
It was like
Charlotte on all the shows.
It was like a special invite from the network, wasn't it?
Yeah, and it was like they could do it like 3 times a year or 5 times a year, and they could bring someone from the other.
And it never happened again.
Yeah.
And it just the result was Charlotte was on every show that week.
Yeah, well, exactly. But like we've got to a point now where the active roster, and maybe it's just a state of wrestling, there's not that many major stars anymore.
Agreed.
So like when, you know, when they had Cena came back, and it was Cena and Kevin Owens versus Roman and Sammy and stuff like that. Like, that's cool and all, and it felt big because Cena was back, but imagine if they would have also had Seth Rollins on that show and Cody Rhodes on that show, and this massive roster to choose from. And there's been this like rhetoric for a while now of like, oh, but if the shows were combined again, you wouldn't be able to feature everybody and people just wouldn't get used. They're not used now. Do
you not think
Jinder Mahal's been sent down to NXT?
Yeah. Do you know what I find interesting, and this, you may not agree with this, but I want to sound it out on it. Do you not think the brand split has been the death of what we'll call main event now, but like Sunday Night Heat? And stuff like that, and Velocity, because you would get some actual stars. They were worth tuning into because you get some actual stars on the rise. Whereas now they're featured on Raw because we got 3 hours of Raw and not enough stars. Yeah. So like instead of getting a Raw that's must see because there's loads of stars on there, you're getting like, well, there's a load of like lower card, mid card stuff that you're not,
a bit of filler almost.
Yeah. So then, like you say, like, all due respect to the other people on SmackDown, but that particular SmackDown, I was like, oh, you've got to see that main event. Don't worry about the rest. You just got to see Cena and KO, and like that's must see. Yeah. The rest, you know, if you're there and you want to watch it, cool. But like that shouldn't be the case. It should be a like a packed card. That you want to see. Yeah. But they don't build it up that way because, like you say, we can't bring Seth over because that's against the rules. And it's like there is a place for these people.
Well, it's like
that's when you go, right, well, we'll have Sunday Night Heat, which was basically just Raw. Yeah. Yeah. And I think Velocity had SmackDown was Velocity. Yeah. Correct me if I'm wrong. Yeah. And I used to watch them when I was a teenager because you get to see certain stars who were building up and they weren't necessarily on the main show. And then, to me, it became story driven. Then it wasn't about like, well, we've got these people, let's put them on the TV. It was like, well, we've got this story going at the minute, and we've got 2 shows to use to tell the story over, rather than, well, I've got to wait another week.
Yeah. No, it is crazy. And if you think like, you know, the size of the roster that they've got at the minute, and the lack of star power. If you think back to one of the most successful times in WWE, like the Attitude Era, or even before that, the Golden Era and all that kind of stuff, before brand splits were even a thing, everyone was featured. They had a solid, you know, hardcore European, Intercontinental and main event scene, and there was storylines going on in all of them, and nobody was ever like, you know, oh, well, they haven't featured him, or this hasn't happened, or because there was stuff going on at all times, and they were able to manage that. In an age now where we've got more TV time than ever, with Raw going 3 hours and SmackDown and a small roster, everyone can get more than enough TV time. We run into that issue at the minute, don't we, where there's just rematches and rematches and rematches all the time.
Exactly.
And AEW made a big point of it, didn't they? Going like, oh, you know, for only the second time, and until this best of 7 series.
Yeah. Now, like, you know, you want rematches, do you? Is that what you want?
Oh, the fucking rematches. But you know, they made a point of like creating exciting first time ever matchups. Yeah. And on Raw and SmackDown, you are seeing the same stuff constantly, which is a bit of a shame. But you've also got, there's no appeal now because Roman holds both belts as well, which is another thing. And it's like, if you're going to unify it, you need a champion on both shows. Yeah. But like,
and then you get times when Roman will have a break for a few weeks.
Exactly. And then you're like, well, there's no main event scene now.
And they put that much on Roman that, you know, he can't have a break. Really, you should be able to have your top stars have weeks off because we've got plenty of stars to work with. But they haven't got plenty of stars to work with.
No, that's the problem. Like you were saying before, it's like, oh, it's not allowed to have Seth Rollins on SmackDown or whatever. But then they make the rules up as they go. Kevin Owens is on Raw this week.
Yeah.
And it's like, what are the rules? I don't. If you've got a brand split, like that's what I mean. I feel like it's time to just get over it. We've got it because we've had it for the last 20 years.
Sometimes they don't bother at all, and sometimes they give you an excuse as to why they're there. But the reality is, like you say, just get rid of the brand split. You don't have to justify anything.
No.
It doesn't matter then.
You
just tell the story that needs telling.
Exactly. And it's like, I guarantee this thing about the networks wanting, Roman's an exclusive to Fox or whatever. Really? Like, both networks would benefit from having the full depth of roster to utilise, surely. Because more people are going to tune in to see more stars that they know. So it's like, I don't know.
But look, I mean, I think one of the biggest victims of the current brand
it's a good Freudian slip.
The current brand split is the likes of Bobby Lashley. Because I don't think there's anyone left on Raw who we can face that I find interesting.
Yeah.
Because it feels like rematches. It feels boring. They might be able to shake it up by having him actually able to be on SmackDown and fight some people on SmackDown.
Yeah. It just creates more opportunity, doesn't it? Like, imagine a Bobby Lashley versus Gunther banger.
Straight out the gate, yeah.
Straight away. I want to see that.
Or Austin Theory trying to square up to Roman Reigns and ended up having to go up against Sami or Solo Sikoa because you're not at Roman's level.
Yeah.
The story's right there, isn't it? It's not a long story, but it's a quick story, isn't it? He's arrogant enough to think he deserves a title shot, takes on one of them. That's a matchup we've not seen.
Yeah.
But instead, he's going to fight Seth again, probably.
Exactly.
And I'm not knocking that story, by the way, but that's just an example. It's like, there's loads of stuff you could do if you weren't limited by the fact that, well, they're Raw guys.
Yeah. I just think, it just doesn't need to be. It doesn't need to be this way anymore, man. No, it's this way because it has been this way for 20 years, and I think it would just make for such better.
There's some belief
television.
we're now at a point that's like the networks won't let it happen. I don't know. It doesn't make any sense.
That's what I don't understand though. Is like surely both networks would benefit from a combined roster.
You'd expect so. But you got to wonder, are they not able to see that, and we're at the behest of what they want? I don't know.
Yeah. And we've been saying for ages, Survivor Series got stale because it was Raw versus Smackdown. Yeah. And it's like,
you were on Smackdown last week. I don't care.
Exactly. Yeah. I'm Raw for life now, damn it.
And honestly, the best of Survivor Series was when NXT got in the mix. That made it relatively exciting. Or this year when they didn't do the whole red versus blue crap. They actually had factions fighting.
Yeah. Well, exactly.
Factions.
Yeah, obviously the War Games format saved it this year, but again, backing up our arguments, it's stale because it's boring. It should feel exciting, it should feel exciting, or you get these matchups that you don't normally get, but it became this thing of who cares, Raw versus SmackDown? Yeah. And that is the point. Who cares? Why separate them?
Yeah, I agree.
It doesn't make any sense. So, do you think...
This is why we probably didn't do this as a debate, because you're like, this is the case. I'm like, yeah, I totally agree.
Yeah, it would be a shit debate. But it's do you think they'll move in this direction? Do you think we will ever see them decide on this? Or do you think for the foreseeable it's going to remain split?
I think unless both shows end up on the same network or the same service, let's say they end up on Disney Plus, then unless there's some way of tying them together, I think they're going to keep them as two separate entities in their own heads. I think to their mind, it'd almost be like admitting defeat if it becomes WWE again rather than Raw being its own thing and SmackDown being its own thing. I think they like to judge them as separate brands and separate shows because look what we made two successful shows, which they still have, but I think that's what makes them so belligerent about them being separate brands.
Yeah.
Because if you bring it all together and you don't have the brand split, then you're almost taking a back step and it's not progressive. Do you know what I mean? They're regressing, and I think that's how they look at it, even though they shouldn't look at it that way. I think that's what's happening. I think it's a case of they're stuck in the ways of saying, well, no, because we put a lot of effort in to make two separate brands and we don't want to go back on ourselves.
Yeah.
Yeah,
I mean, they even used to do, didn't they, Raw branded pay-per-views or SmackDown branded pay-per-views. Every premium live event that they have available now is always a co-branded show, isn't it? It's everybody.
Because there's not enough going on.
And one of the big things I missed, I used to love about, back in the day, is you'd set up the big culmination on Raw ahead of the pay-per-view on the Sunday of some big thing, and then Friday would be the go-home show. Yeah. And you're literally 2 days away and you get to the fucking brink of it. And now it's if it's a Raw match, it was a week ago, it was a week ago.
You're waiting for the culmination.
Exactly. And you're
I honestly, I assume there may be some sort of reason why they're delaying this story. maybe for Bray's sake. But if it's because he's only got a week of SmackDown every week to tell the story, right? And you may argue, well, Alexa's doing something, but Alexa's is kind of, it's connected, but it's separate. Like what's going on with Alexa isn't what's going on with Bray and Uncle Howdy and LA Knight. They're two separate things that just happen to be connected, right? But if you could feature what's going on with Bray over both shows, we'd probably progress more, and people are getting frustrated with how long it's taken to tell this tale.
Yeah.
And that you know, it may be by design, because I don't know, like, I think a lot of people aren't sure whether he's even ready to wrestle yet. I don't know. But
we'll find out at the Rumble, because he's having a pitch match.
Well, it could be anyone wrestling. We don't know. It's going to be pitch black.
This is true. I'm so interested to see how they do that. By the way, I think it's just going to be the weirdest thing.
The weirdest thing.
To see how they pull that off.
The weirdest thing.
I've got totally distracted now by talking about that, because I had a really good point to make. It's escaped me. It has.
Escaped. But in any case, but like, honestly, well, while I'm harping on about that, like, how do you bring that in together? Because we've got Uncle Howdy hassling Alexa on Raw, so presumably they're going to be an entity across both shows anyway.
Exactly. So it'll get to a point where we need to have them all together somewhere. So what happens? Does Alexa just leave Raw and
just wait for pay-per-views?
Yeah, but it's like, maybe. But like, going back to that thing I was saying before, I remember what I was going to say now. You know, we talked about having like the different tiers. You'd have like the hardcore, for no disrespect, but for like the lower rung guys who want, you know, but give them something to go after and do. Like, you could say the same about the 24/7 title if they hadn't fucking ruined it.
Gone now.
But you've got the Intercontinental title and the US title on the same level.
Yeah.
Whereas you used to have European, Intercontinental, and it just made sense. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah,
to like move people up through the rankings, and you could start to see someone on that kind of upward trajectory. But now it's kind of like, well, oh, he's in the IC picture or the US picture, and they're the same picture.
Yeah.
So it's like,
well, if you had to do it that way, what would you put higher than the other? Or IC now?
I mean, it looks god awful, but the Intercontinental title is the secondary title, and it should always be the secondary title.
Yeah, that's just you with your historic, like.
Well, it's true. Endurance. It's true. It's the workhorse title, and I know the US title's got a great history in its own right.
This begs a question. Like, I know they're unifying a lot of belts at the minute, and there's talk that they may split them up again. But like, what would you do title wise if they turn around and said tomorrow we're gonna end the brand split? What would you do title wise? Would you keep them unified? Just have a world champion, tag team champions, your IC and your US, or would you introduce the likes of the European in that again to give more option?
Well, I mean, for me, the US title replaced the European, so it's like, if you accept the fact the US title is a slight rung below the IC title, it's fine.
I mean, the European would be great to come back if they do NXT Europe, or when they do NXT Europe.
I would love it. I love that belt. But it would be such a great thing for the tag division as well. Like, we always say, there's about 4 tag teams, and there's 2 on Raw and 2 on SmackDown.
Yeah.
Same with like the women. Like, there's a women's tag division still. I don't know who has the belts now, but there's a women's tag division still.
Yeah.
And it's like the same thing. So by merging them, you give more opportunities for depth in them divisions as well.
Well, look at, like, how far away do Alpha Academy feel from the tag titles?
Too far away.
Because you barely see the Usos on Raw anyway.
Yeah, they should be on the cusp of it.
They should be. They're a legitimately good tag team. One of the very few tag teams we've got in WWE in general. Yeah. And it just feels so disconnected right now.
To be fair,
you don't put them in the picture at all.
Well, on Raw, we had a tag team turmoil match, and it was them 3 teams, because it's the only 3 tag teams they've got. Yeah. And it was Alpha Academy, it was Street Profits, I think, and it was Judgment Day. And Judgment Day are the ones who got the win.
Which doesn't make any
sense.
So
it's like,
you got on Raw, you've got what? Street Profits and Alpha Academy.
Yeah,
pretty much. I can think of. I'm not counting Judgment Day. SmackDown, you got, are the Viking Raiders on SmackDown now?
Yes.
Yeah, Viking Raiders. The New Day when they're there.
Yeah. What's that new faction with Top Dollar and all that? Would you class them? Are they?
I mean, similar to Judgment Day, is like, unless they clearly show you that there's a tag team there in the faction. Because this is the thing. You look at some factions, you go, well, they're the tag team. That guy's probably going to go for the mid title. That guy's going to look at DX. Look at the other ones.
Yeah.
Well, look at the Bloodline.
Yeah.
You know, if Solo went for a mid card title, you go, well, that kind of adds up because you got tag team guys. You got to make it. You know, it kind of works. So until they establish who in Judgment Day is what, like if Damien went for the US title again, sound. But then you've got Rhea who could go for the US title. Well, she could legitimately, but I don't know if they're going to pull the trigger on that. But you're going to put Dom and Finn in a tag team together because they don't want Finn to go up against
exactly.
Roman.
Yeah,
I don't know. Judgment Day is too weak for me.
Yeah, I just feel like you instantly add so much more depth to them divisions. So it get past the rematch problem that we have at the moment, creates more exciting new matchups to be had, but also it doesn't take away from the show because then across both shows you're making sure that each tier is represented, if that makes sense. It's not just like, well, here's, no disrespect, but here's the shit, the fodder that we've got on Raw, and here's the fodder we've got on SmackDown, and stick them in a backstage segment. Yeah. If you've created the, fucking the European division or whatever, or the US division.
Or let's face it, how many times has Raw, because Raw's 3 hours and SmackDown's 2, and there is a bit of a problem there because the different lengths of show, but how many times have we had easily an hour's worth of bullshit on Raw because they can't fill 3 hours?
Yeah.
And you've got SmackDown guys who aren't getting enough time. It just makes sense.
Like the whole 24/7 title stuff was awful, wasn't it? We were doing
Let's face it was no Raw Underground.
Raw Underground. We were doing game show type stuff with the Bloody Viking Raiders and that, and Street Profits. Remember that?
I know
you enjoyed it. I didn't. But it was literally they just ran out of stuff to do, I guess. Like it was, and it was just the same people all the time in those positions. So
what happened to Riddick Moss? Is it Riddick Moss?
Matt Cat Moss, isn't he?
No, I'm thinking of the wrong guy. Fuck, what was his name?
Is it Matt Cat Moss?
No, it wasn't Matt Cat Moss. I went for Riddick Moss and I don't know why I did. He played when Apollo was
Dabba-Kato.
Dabba-Kato. I don't know why I called him Riddick Moss. Was like, whatever happened to Dabba-Kato?
I don't know. He was last General Aziz, wasn't he? Yeah. The last we saw him. Who knows?
Because when I think of Raw Underground, I think of his big ass, and then like. He's just lumbering around the ring with no ropes on him. And then I totally forgot his name, called him Rick Moss, but either there. It just still makes me laugh. It's like, yeah, my dad owns the business, but I live in the basement. Like, well, how on the nose is this?
Yeah.
I got my own space, my own wrestling show, I'm totally independent from my parents.
Yeah.
It's
exactly.
Fucking weird, Shane.
Yeah.
Fucking weird.
Well, I mean, it's a great point you make. We've got these shows split at the minute with, not all talent on both shows, and then that's how you end up with shit like this.
Yeah,
because you've got to utilize people somehow in some way.
I mean, I will be clear. I'm not going to blame the brand split entirely. Like, I do think their insistence on keeping the tag titles unified and like pretty much on SmackDown, and it's probably more of a problem for the tag titles than it is for Roman, to be honest. Like, we're at a point now. The Street Profits are legitimately a good tag team that should be title holders. Mm-hmm. How many times did they face the Street Profits? How many times themselves? How many times did they face themselves? How many times did they face the Usos?
Nearly as many times as the New Day at this point.
So now they either face them again and win, and you go, well, all right, so 100th time's a charm, I guess.
Yeah.
Or they don't get a shot at the titles until they move away from the Usos. Like, that isn't a problem caused by the brand split. That's a problem caused by the fact that they've kept the titles on the Usos and unified the fuckers.
Yeah.
So the tag scene's just dead.
Yeah. And like for the women's division as well, I would combine both of the women's belts into the women's world title, but I'd have a secondary title for the women.
Yeah. And you want to put women in there? Ronda's not
it's a contentious topic, isn't it?
Well, I mean, here's the thing, though. Like, we're in a world where, a title isn't lesser because it's the women's title. Mm-hmm. Would you not consider introducing the European as a women's secondary?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, could do something like that. Could bring one of the NXT titles up and have it as a women's title.
North American.
Yeah, exactly. Like, there's loads of stuff you could do, but I'd have 2 singles titles for the women, but because that's the problem. There's no women's mid card.
Yeah,
because you're either fighting for the SmackDown Women's Championship or the Raw Women's Championship. Yeah. So what do you do with people who aren't ready to be champ?
You put in a tag team. That makes
exactly.
No sense.
And then you don't have a tag. You know what I mean? You don't have any women's tag matches.
Yeah.
So I think it massively Look,
I mean, typical WWE, the tag scenes in general are shocking.
Yeah, but look at AEW. I know we're talking about the brand split, but that TBS title has done wonders for obviously Jade, but also people like Anna Jay.
Yeah,
she would never be going up for the world title really. Yeah, but she's had opportunities.
The laughable thing is people don't want to talk about the good stuff AEW does, but the TBS is a good shout. The laughable thing about it is the insistence that it's not a secondary title.
Yeah,
it is.
It is definitely.
Just admit that bit because everything else about it is boss.
Yeah. That's what I mean. But that's what they need to do. and create fresh matches in the women's division as well. It just makes so much sense. I think it would make a much better product.
Liv's a classic example of the mid-card issue. There's no mid-card title for her to go for, so she had to go for the women's title.
Yeah.
And then it seemed unrealistic. Some people got behind it, some people didn't. She needed something to elevate her and push, and all she could do was go for the biggest title.
Yeah, exactly. Like, if you think about it, Liv could have been the women's Intercontinental champion, and while Ronda could come back and was the world champion or whatever, and then she builds up. Like, some of the greatest moments was when Hulk Hogan made Ultimate Warrior. Warrior was the Intercontinental champ, Hogan was the world champ, and the title versus title, Warrior beat him. He'd elevated him to the main event, and that was it. He was a main event guy then.
And now they're trying to do stuff like that now with the likes of Austin Theory. Who that's his whole thing, isn't it? I'm going to win the Rumble and I'm going to go against Roman.
Yeah.
All right. As the US champ, and you go, cool, that's classic stuff. But this is essentially what they've done with the women's division. I know we're slightly digressing, apologies. This is essentially what they've got. The problem for the women's division, isn't it, of going, well, there's been no mid card, so your female Austin Theory only is the only option of going for the big title. That's it, nothing else.
That's it. And back to the Liv Morgan example, it's like people look at her world title win as like, she flubbed it, or it was a failure, when really, maybe they should have, if there was a secondary title, they could have given her that, let her build herself up.
I dare say they'd have given her a longer run with it as well.
Yeah.
The bottom line is they didn't want to keep the title on her because they had other shit they wanted to do.
Yeah.
But she could have quite happily been I'm going to say European. I think that'd be a good shout.
Yeah, I agree.
Could have been a European champ.
Yeah. So, yeah. I'm fascinated to hear what other people think on this. I think some people. I'm going to put a poll up. I think after this, when it's live, I'm going to ask.
You do you, man. You do you.
Because I'm fascinated to know. But obviously, let us know in the comments. Do you think that it should be separate shows with separate talent? I know some people have said it would feel stale seeing people every week and stuff. But you don't have to see people every week. That's what I don't get. Just because the rosters are merged doesn't mean we need to see. Austin Theory on Raw and SmackDown every week. He might just be he's on Raw that week and he's not booked on the SmackDown that week. That's fine.
Yeah, because people are allowed a break. In fact, it'll probably be better health-wise for the stars, so they don't have to be there all the fucking time.
Well, exactly. So, I don't know, but fascinated to know, do you think that it should be split up still, or should they merge it? I'm going merge.
Merge.
Very Friends reference there.
Hey.
But thank you very much. Do let us know in the YouTube comments. Thank you to anyone who is watching on YouTube. If you've not already, please subscribe. We've had really amazing subscriber growth the last few months. So thank you very much to anyone who has subscribed. Also, you can watch us for free on Pro Wrestling TV as well as the plethora of other wrestling content on there, so we can't recommend it enough.
Probably one of your greatest sources for the independent wrestling scene. You got the likes of MLW on there, New South Pro Wrestling, you've got AAA, you've got TNT.
Yeah. Check out some wrestling from our neck of the woods in TNT.
Indeed.
Extreme
Warrior Wrestling. Yeah. You've got some fantastic documentaries on there. I keep mentioning it all the time, but Sadomania, the Fanship to Friendship documentary about Hulk Hogan's Superfan. Fantastic watch if you've not seen it. We've got obviously talk show content like ourselves, like Alicia A2theK. Pronounced that right?
Alicia A2theK.
I'm just copying you. A2theK. Doing the MLW's Insider. Obviously MLW exclusively signed to Pro Wrestling TV right now, so Alicia sort of follows in with that and does the sort of talk show element to that. You got equivalent to ourselves. You got Bell to Bells. You got loads of just fantastic wresling content 24/7. That's the whole
absolutely 24/7, all completely free, available everywhere. So just get it, check it out. Yeah. I guarantee after 5 minutes of downloading it, you'll be hooked on something. So also make sure you check out topropebrewing.com. Our friends at Top Rope have some of the greatest beers in all the land, and you can get yourself 10% off using A2theK10 on their website. And spring is approaching, summer's approaching. Get yourself some A2theK t-shirts. Don't know why I'm pointing at this, because this is not an A2theK.
The ones neither of us are wearing.
Yes. I know, really, we should wear our own.
I know, right?
That would be, the right thing to do. But you can go and check them out as well, including new designs from our friends Alt Wrestling Tees. These guys are awesome. They don't just do designs for shows like us. They do loads of inspired designs.
Yeah, like well, you mentioned obviously you want to pick up one of the Yo Listen, the Acclaimed t-shirt. They got a few other Acclaimed ones. They got tons of content for you. Like if you're a fan of any wrestler, there's probably some sort of content there, or some sort of t-shirt there that you can see independently made by Alt Wrestling Tees.
Absolutely
Fantastic.
So go and check them out on Instagram, Alt Wrestling Tees. And until next week, make sure you let us know should we end the brand split. Until next week.
Until next week.
Bye.